Hi there. Welcome to this lesson on managing stress and emotional eating. If you've ever felt like cravings hit you out of nowhere, or that you're suddenly eating before you even know what's happening, there's often something deeper going on. Underneath the thoughts and emotions, there's the body, the nervous system. And when it's in survival mode, it will do almost anything to feel better fast. This week, we're going to learn how to work with the body directly. We'll explore simple tools to create calm, interrupt the craving loop, and send a powerful message to the brain. We're safe now. We don't have to react. We can respond. This is one of the most important turning points in recovery because it's where we finally stop blaming ourselves for our cravings and start understanding what's really going on underneath. If you've ever reached for food the moment something felt overwhelming, or found yourself eating without even realizing how you got to the kitchen, that isn't a failure. That's a signal. And this week, we're learning how to listen to that signal in a new way with curiosity, compassion, and the strength to pause instead of react. When you experience stress, whether it's external, like a tense conversation or a long to-do list, or internal, like fatigue or anxiety, your brain immediately activates a system called the HPA axis. That stands for hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal. Think of it as your internal survival network. In response to stress, the hypothalamus signals the pituitary gland, which then triggers the adrenal glands to release stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones prepare your body to act fast. They raise your blood pressure, increase your alertness, and redirect energy away from long-term thinking, digestion, immune function, or even empathy, and toward short-term survival. In this state, the amygdala, your brain's fear center, becomes hyperactive. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, which governs self-awareness, decision-making, and values-based behavior, goes offline. And then another system kicks in, the dopamine network. This is the brain's reward and motivation system, responsible for remembering what has brought you relief in the past. It includes the ventral tegmental area and the nucleus accumbens, two areas that light up when we anticipate a reward. If processed food has ever helped you feel better, your dopamine system will push you toward that same solution the moment discomfort shows up again. This is how cravings work. They're not random. They're a predictable survival response based on past learning. Your brain is trying to help you feel better by calling on the fastest tool it knows, food. Especially when that food is processed, engineered for maximum reward. The craving loop becomes even stronger. Processed food causes a huge dopamine spike, followed by a crash. That crash leads to more stress, more cravings, and deeper entrenchment of the pattern. The cycle is known as associative learning. The brain starts pairing emotional discomfort, like sadness, anger, or overwhelm, with relief via food. Eventually, the emotion itself becomes a trigger, even before you're fully aware of what you're feeling. And that's not your fault. That's neuroplasticity. It's how the brain works when it's trying to keep you safe. You're not weak, you're wired, and that wiring can change. So far, we've looked at how stress impacts the brain, and we've talked in the past about how different parts of you show up to manage emotional overwhelm. Now let's talk about how to bring the body, your nervous system, into the recovery process. Because here's the thing, your craving is not just a mental habit. It's a physiological state. When your nervous system is activated, when your body is in fight, flight, or freeze, you're not just more likely to crave food. You're wired to reach for anything that brings relief. The body's stress response is governed by the autonomic nervous system, and most of us are living in a constant state of sympathetic activation. That's the mode of high alert, fast breathing, shallow focus, and tension. It's the body's emergency setting. And it's what makes firefighter parts panic and act fast. To change the craving cycle, we need to create a new baseline, one where the body feels safe enough to pause. That's where nervous system regulation tools come in. These aren't fancy, they're simple, portable, and powerful. Here's one you can try right now: the 3-minute reset. Sit down, feel your feet flat on the floor, let your spine rise tall, but soften your shoulders. Breathe in through your nose for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Exhale slowly through your mouth for 6. As you breathe, say silently, "A part of me is feeling something big. That makes sense. I'm here now. We don't need to fix it. Just pause." You can also try adding a sensory cue: a warm mug in your hands, a cool cloth on your face, a soft texture like a blanket or sweater, calming sounds like instrumental music or rain. These sensory signals bypass the thinking brain and go straight to the limbic system, the emotional brain. They send a message to your body: you are safe now. And that's the goal. You don't need to eliminate emotion. You just need to stay with it without fear. Here are some additional tools that work in the moment. Name 3 things you can see, hear, and feel. This grounds you in the present. Step outside for 2 minutes of fresh air and full body movement. Journal for 60 seconds. What's here right now? What does this part of me need? Use cold water, splash your face, or hold a cold object to shift your state fast. These tools may seem small, but they make space. And in that space, you begin to reclaim choice. Remember, cravings are not the problem. Reactivity is. When you give your body a chance to reset, you give yourself the opportunity to respond instead of repeat. And over time, these moments of pause create new neural pathways. You begin to associate stress with safety, not with food. That's when the brain starts rewiring. That's recovery. Now let's talk about that voice inside your head. Because here's the truth: most of us don't realize how harsh our internal dialogue has become, especially after years of struggling with food. After a binge or a craving episode, it's common to hear thoughts like, "What's wrong with you? You're never going to get this right. You're weak. You'll always screw it up." Those thoughts don't come out of nowhere. They usually come from a manager part. A part that believes it has to control you through criticism. And maybe that strategy worked in childhood. Maybe it kept you from punishment or helped you meet impossible standards. But now, that same voice is keeping you stuck. Harsh self-talk increases stress. When you criticize yourself, you activate the same biological stress response that cravings come from. The amygdala lights up, cortisol spikes, the prefrontal cortex goes offline, and your body gets flooded with the same chemicals that made you vulnerable to the craving in the first place. It's a loop. So, what's the way out? Not more control, more compassion. When you speak kindly to yourself, even just a little, you engage the parasympathetic nervous system. You release oxytocin, the hormone of safety and connection. You restore blood flow to the prefrontal cortex, which means you're better able to make wise decisions. Compassion isn't indulgent, it's stabilizing. In parts work, we think of this as the self coming forward, the calm, compassionate, curious presence inside you that knows how to care for your parts without silencing or scolding them. And this self speaks differently. Where your critic says you failed again, yourself might say, that was a hard moment. No wonder a part of me reached for food. Where the manager says you're out of control, yourself might say, that part of me was trying to protect me from something painful. Let's slow down and listen. And instead of, now I have to start over, you say, I'm still on the path. This is part of learning. These aren't just affirmations, they're repatterning tools. They change how your brain relates to stress, how your parts relate to each other, and how your whole internal system experiences recovery. Try this practice. Tonight, or anytime you feel the urge to criticize yourself, pause. Place a hand over your heart or your chest and say, I see you. I know you're doing the best you can. I know this craving isn't who you are. I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to stay and listen. It may feel awkward. That's okay. You're speaking a language your system may never have heard before. And slowly, as you repeat it, your protectors begin to trust that something new is possible, that they're not alone, that there's someone inside you who can handle what's happening without shutting it down. That's how internal safety is built. When we step back and look at everything you've been learning this week, it becomes clear that we're not just dealing with a food problem. We're healing a long-standing system of reactions, physical, emotional, and relational, that developed in an attempt to survive stress. The craving itself is just the surface. Underneath it are dozens of micro patterns your brain has wired together. Stress leads to emotional activation, which leads to nervous system overwhelm, which calls forward a part of you that's learned that food brings relief. It's so fast and often so quiet that you don't even realize it's happening until the food is already in front of you. But here's the real transformation. When you learn to witness these patterns without judgment, they start to loosen their grip. The part of you that felt hijacked now feels seen. The part that always had to react now feels heard. The part that once panicked starts to soften because it senses there's finally someone present who can respond with steadiness. And that someone is you. You've begun to take back leadership from the automated systems that have run the show for so long. You're no longer getting swept into the cycle unconsciously. You're building an inner presence that can pause, observe, and respond, not from shame, but from wisdom. That may feel like small moments, jotting a craving in your journal, breathing for 30 seconds before opening the fridge, noticing a manager's voice without immediately obeying it. Those are not small. They are restructuring the way your brain responds to stress. Your internal leadership is strengthening. Instead of being ruled by urgency, you are cultivating stability. Instead of trying to eliminate discomfort, you're learning how to meet it. That's the work. That's recovery. And it's happening right now in the small ways you're showing up differently this week. Before we wrap up, I want to invite you into a few moments of quiet reflection. These journaling prompts aren't homework. They're an offering, a gentle way to deepen the connection between yourself and the parts of you that have been trying so hard to manage stress. You don't need to write a lot. A few honest lines, or even one or two words, can be enough to create a shift inside. What matters is that you approach this process with kindness, not pressure. Here's how I suggest using these prompts. First, settle your body. Take a few slow breaths. Feel your feet on the floor. Remind your system that you're safe. Invite your parts to speak. Let the part of you that usually reacts, the one that gets overwhelmed or reaches for food, have a voice. You're not correcting it, you're listening. Let yourself be present. As you write, hold space with curiosity and compassion. You're not writing to fix, you're writing to understand. So here are some prompts for this week. What situations tend to make me feel the most emotionally overwhelmed? Not what should bother you, but what actually does bother you. Be real with yourself. What are some of the messages I hear from my inner critic when I feel stressed or eat emotionally? Try to write them down word for word. This helps you identify your manager parts more clearly. When I reach for food in response to emotion, what might that part be trying to protect me from? This is a question for your firefighter. You're not judging it, you're asking what it's afraid you'll have to feel. What happens in my body during a craving? What physical sensations do I notice? Bring in body awareness here. This helps you separate the emotion from the behavior. What would myself say to the part of me that uses food to cope? Try writing a short letter or even one sentence of reassurance. This is how you begin leading from self. What's one moment from this week when I responded differently than I used to? It doesn't matter how small. Celebrate the win. This is how you notice the change that's already happening. Let these prompts work gently on your heart. If you don't get to all of them, that's okay. If one of them speaks louder than the rest, start there. The point isn't perfection, it's presence. If you've made it this far, I hope you're feeling something different, not just intellectually, but emotionally and physically too. Not fixed, not perfect, but a little more grounded, a little more aware, a little more compassionate toward the parts of you that have worked so hard to help you get through stress in the only way they knew how. What you've begun to do this week is interrupt the cycle of urgency that cravings depend on, not by willpower, not by shutting it all down, but by learning how to stay. You're staying present with your body. You're staying present with your emotions. You're staying present with the younger, more protective, more reactive parts of you that once had to take over to feel safe. And every time you stay present, even for just a moment, you send a message to your nervous system that you are no longer in danger, that you don't need to run, hide, or eat to disappear from yourself. That's what rewiring looks like. That's what recovery is made of. There may still be moments this week that feel hard. There may be cravings that come on strong, emotions that bubble up unexpectedly, or inner critics that try to reassert control. But you are not back at zero. You're walking a new path now. One breath at a time, one pause at a time, one moment of kindness towards yourself at a time. And with each of these moments, you're becoming the steady, compassionate, wise leader your system has always needed. This is the beginning of real emotional freedom, not just from food, but from the patterns that have kept you locked in stress and self-blame for far too long. You're not doing this alone. We're right here with you. Thank you for listening.